Okay, now we get to our second reading from the letter of St. James. As we've been reading, we got 2 Sundays left, including this one. It's just so good. I love St. James. Okay, James chapter 3, verses 16 through chapter 4, verse 3. Beloved, where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every foul practice. But the wisdom from above is first of all pure, then peaceable, gentle, compliant, full of mercy and good fruits, without inconstancy or insincerity. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace for those who cultivate peace. Where do the wars and where do the conflicts among you come from? Is it not from your passions that make war within your members? You covet, but do not possess. You kill and envy, but you cannot obtain. You fight and wage war. You do not possess because you do not ask. You ask, but do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. Okay, James getting a little feisty here, and actually, like this is actually the mildest part of this particular session. So check out this part. Gosh, this is so good. Okay, so he actually begins in verse 13. Well, actually, so if you get a chance, read the first half of chapter 3 as well, because he talks about the tongue and the power that the tongue has, and how we actually need to be really careful about the way that we use our tongue, because it can set an entire forest ablaze, basically, like with false teaching, with slander, with gossip, those kinds of things. Okay, but then he says, who among you is wise and understanding? So just think, among your community, who's wise and understanding? Let him show his works by a good life in the humility that comes from wisdom. So wisdom is naturally meant, and it will naturally breed humility. That is so important for us to understand. If we seek to be wise, we will naturally be humble. If we are not humble, that means we are not actually wise. So that's something to be on the lookout for. Okay, but then he says this, but if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. So again, just like if I seek wisdom, then I'm going to be humble. If I don't have wisdom, or if I suppose I could say, if I have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition. So remember, we talked about that envy that we were talking about with the devil, and with the unrighteous man compared to the righteous man, that envy or that bitter jealousy or selfish ambition, right? If I'm seeking to place myself above others, then what does he say? He says, do not boast and be false to the truth. Stop it. Just don't even bother. Don't even bother. He says, wisdom of this kind does not come down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. That is so strong. It is demonic to have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts. Whew, that is so strong. So then from there, he says, where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every foul practice, every vile practice. So wherever these things are, there's disorder and there's foul practice. So you can actually just think of the world. Think of the world. Think of the political atmosphere that we're in right now, where there's nothing but jealousy and bitterness and selfish ambition. And so therefore what? Everything is out of order. It is disordered. And there are foul practices, deceit and lies and contentions and rivalries and divisions and like this. It just goes on and on and on and on, to the point that anyone who's maybe striving to live a righteous life is just like, I don't know who's telling me the truth right now. Like that is the wickedness of this selfish ambition, of bitter jealousy. But then he says, but the wisdom from above. So that's the bad wisdom, we could say, which is not true wisdom. It's false wisdom. So therefore, the wisdom which is from above is first of all pure, peaceable, gentle, compliant. Another way to say compliant is open to reason. In other words, like actually open to receiving reason and logic. Is full of mercy and good fruits, without inconstancy or insincerity, without those things. So in other words, it is sincere, it is constant. Just think of like, gosh, the contrast between those two is, one of these is just so pleasant. For some reason, though, we tend to choose the one that is less pleasant. I suppose that's because we're all infected by sin. I've been preaching about this infection with sin that we have. Anyway, so he talks about this. And so the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace for those who cultivate peace. Are you seeking to cultivate peace rather than sowing division and rivalries and jealousy and selfish ambition? Am I seeking to cultivate peace? And then he goes into this. Where do you think the wars come from among you? Where do your conflicts come from? Right? Is it not from your passions that make war within your members? Because why? Because you covet even though you don't possess. You kill and envy, but you cannot obtain. Right? This whatever it is that you're striving for is out of reach. You think of the person who just like is always seeking to fill him or herself up with worldly goods. It's like no matter how much is obtained, there's still more. There's still more, and it's just like out of reach because I'll never actually be satisfied by these worldly things. You could think of the most powerful person in the world. That person still desires more power, and as long as that desire, that selfish ambition is there, there's nothing that will satisfy. And so there's just a coveting, even though there's no possessing. There's no possessing. There's killing even and envy, even though there's no obtaining. You fight and wage war. You do not possess because you do not ask. You ask, but you do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on you. So he's just like, okay, here's the deal. Like you're not asking, or if when you are asking, you're asking and treating God like he's a vending machine. Like it's just a mere contractual thing when God desires our hearts, our love, our sonship. Instead, we're treating him like a vending machine. And so we ask wrongly to spend it on our passions. Again, just like I want to read a little bit before the verse, I want to read a little bit after. He gets really strong here. He says, adulterers. He just like busts out, adulterers, do you not know that to be a lover of the world means enmity with God? That is envy, rivalry with God. He's an enemy of ours. To be a lover of the world means enmity with God. Therefore, whoever wants to be a lover of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Whew. Gosh, that is radical. If I want to love the world, I will be an enemy of God. Just let yourself think about that. And so at the end, a few verses later in verse 7, he says, so submit yourselves to God, because he resists the proud and he gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. I don't know what next Sunday's reading from St. James is. I kind of hope it's from this part. I'm not sure though. But anyway, like gosh, this reality of like I want to make sure that I'm not seeking friendship with the world, but instead I want to resist that. And I want to surrender to God, submit to him in all things. Because when I let myself go, when I let my passions go without them being checked, if I fail in self-control, then I end up turning away from God and making myself an enemy of his. And that's not a good place to be, That's not a good place to be. It's like the disciples, they don't get it. Where Peter last week, he pulls Jesus aside and he rebukes him. And so Jesus has no choice but to say, get behind me, Satan. 1 minute in Matthew's gospel, Matthew chapter 16, Jesus he lays the foundation stone. You are the rock on which I will build my church. And the very next minute, he says, you are a stumbling stone to me. You are a hindrance to me. Right? Like that's the wild thing. When we resist the will of God, it is unspiritual, it is earthly, it is demonic. And so we end up becoming enemies of God. And that's rough. Okay, so anyway, so the whole point here is what? To seek the wisdom which is from above all. The wisdom which is pure, peaceable, gentle, compliant, full of mercy and good fruits, without inconstancy, without insincerity. That's the desire, to seek that wisdom, even if it costs us and when it costs us something. Even when we have to turn away from the world so that we can live in the world. So that we can live for the Lord, that desire. Okay, gosh, what a gift. I love this Bible study. I'm going to continue loving it. I'm going to tell you that I continue loving it because it's just so good. So I hope and pray this was good. If you find this helpful, I encourage you to share it with other people. Find a way to help other people get into the Word of God, which is living and effective, sharper than any two-edged sword. And as always, I will look forward to seeing you next week. God bless you.